Okay, real talk. I went into You, Me, and Tuscany expecting to be mildly entertained and then immediately forget everything about it by the next morning. That is not a dig. That is just the honest expectation I carry into most modern rom-coms, because the genre has trained me, over years of watching, to calibrate my hopes accordingly. You show up, you get the pretty locations, you get the misunderstanding that drags out 40 minutes longer than it needs to, you get the airport run or the rain kiss or whatever the signature grand gesture is, and then credits roll and you feel vaguely warm inside and move on with your life. And here's the thing. You, Me, and Tuscany is almost exactly that movie. Almost every beat lands where you expect it to land. The tropes are all present and accounted for. The structure is so familiar, you could practically narrate it yourself from the trailer alone. And yet, I did not forget about it by the next morning. Something about this film stuck. Not in a profound, life-altering, this changed me kind of way, but in that specific way that only a certain kind of charming, slightly messy, genuinely felt rom-com can manage. Where the flaws are completely visible, the formula is transparent as glass. And somehow none of that matters as much as you thought it would, because the movie is too busy being likable to let you hold the predictability against it. So today we're going to talk about exactly that. Why this movie works despite everything working against it. What gets right, what absolutely botches, and what it quietly says without meaning to, I think, about why we keep watching rom-coms that don't surprise us and why that might not actually be a problem. Let's get into it. I want to start with the structure because I think it's important to name it clearly before anything else. You, Me, and Tuscany is built from rom-com Lego bricks that have been assembled approximately 4,000 times before. Fake relationship, check. Love triangle with an obvious outcome, check. The protagonist who runs from vulnerability rather than just having a single honest conversation, check. The glamorous European backdrop that does a lot of heavy emotional lifting on behalf of the screenplay, absolutely check. The fake relationship setup arrives early and with minimal ceremony. Anna needs a cover story. The reasons are a little rushed, honestly, and if you poke at the logic, it doesn't hold up to much pressure. And Michael is recruited into the role of convincing boyfriend for reasons that are simultaneously contrived and completely acceptable within the genre's unspoken contract. We know where this goes. The movie knows we know where this goes. And there's this almost breezy quality to how it just leans into that shared understanding, like it's winking at the audience and saying, yeah, we're doing this. Are you in or out? And most people watching are in. Because that's the thing about familiarity in this genre. It isn't the weakness some critics treat it as. There's actual comfort in knowing the shape of a story before it unfolds. It's the same reason people reread favorite novels or rewatch certain films on sick days. The pleasure isn't in surprise. It's in the quality of the execution within the expected form. You, Me, and Tuscany understands this on some level, even if the script doesn't always have the craft to back up the confidence. The love triangle, meanwhile, is as telegraphed as it comes. From the moment the third point of that triangle walks into the frame, you know exactly how the geometry resolves. There is no version of this story where Anna ends up with the wrong person. You know it, I know it, the film knows it, and still it commits to the tension like it genuinely believes you might be uncertain. Which is charming, in its own slightly delusional way. A movie that plays its cards with a straight face, even when everyone at the table can already see them. Let's talk about Anna. Because she is the reason this film works as well as it does, and she deserves more than a footnote in a conversation about formula and tropes. Anna is impulsive in a way that is written very specifically, not the clumsy, bumbling, self-deprecating impulsive that a lot of rom-com heroines get saddled with, where the impulsiveness is mostly a vehicle for physical comedy and embarrassing situations. Her impulsiveness is emotional. She reacts before she thinks. She commits to things, feelings, plans, positions, and arguments before she's had time to examine whether she actually believes them. And then she has to live in the wreckage of that while slowly, awkwardly, figuring out what she actually wants. That's a richer character sketch than this genre usually bothers with, and the performance leans into it beautifully. There are these small moments, not the big dramatic ones, but the in-between ones The transitional beats where the camera is technically moving on to the next scene, where you can see and recalibrate in real time. A flicker of something behind the eyes, a slight adjustment in posture. The performance has real interiority, which is not a given, and it elevates the material significantly. Her journey in the film is fundamentally about the distance between who she presents herself to be and who she actually is when nobody's performing. She's built this image, capable, self-sufficient, someone who has it together, and the entire architecture of the Tuscany trip is slowly dismantling it. Not in a punishing way, in the way that being in a beautiful place, slightly out of your element, surrounded by people who don't already have a fixed idea of who you are, can make you more honest with yourself than you intended to be. That's the quiet, emotional engine of this story. And when the film remembers to trust it, it genuinely moves. Here's my honest take on the Michael dynamic. It's the strongest thing in the film by a comfortable margin, and it works specifically because the two leads found something that the script didn't always hand them on a plate. Michael is written somewhat generically, the stable, grounded, slightly guarded counterpart to Anna's chaotic energy. The type of love interest who exists primarily to reflect the protagonist back to herself. In lesser hands, he be furniture. Attractive, present, and ultimately interchangeable with about 30 other leading men from 30 other Netflix originals. But the chemistry they generate together is specific in a way that chemistry in movies often isn't. It's not just warmth and banter, though there's plenty of that. It's a specific texture of friction. They grate on each other in ways that feel real. They have this quality in their exchanges where you sense that neither of them is performing for the other, that they're actually responding to each other, which sounds like the minimum bar, but in this genre, it genuinely isn't. The fake relationship scenes, which are supposed to be the engine of the romantic tension, are actually the weakest part of this dynamic, interestingly. It's the scenes outside the performance, the moments when they've stopped pretending and haven't yet started being honest, where the film comes alive. A conversation over dinner that starts as an argument and lands somewhere neither of them expected. A shared laugh at the wrong moment. A silence that holds more than the dialogue around it. This is a couple you believe in, which, again, given how aggressively standard the rest of the film's romantic architecture is a genuine achievement. Okay, here's where I need to get a little critical. Because as much as this film charmed me, it is genuinely confused about what it's trying to be. And that confusion has a cost. You, me, and Tuscany cannot quite decide who it's for. There are scenes that feel squarely aimed at a younger, social media-fluent audience. The pacing is faster, the jokes are lighter, the emotional stakes are deliberately kept low. And then, almost without transition, the film will pivot into something quieter and more melancholy. A scene between Anna and one of the supporting characters that has real emotional weight. Dialogue that's trying to say something honest about loneliness or regret, and it feels like it wandered in from a different, more serious film. Neither mode is bad. The lighter version of this movie is fun. The quieter version has genuine feeling. The problem is that they don't build on each other. They just alternate, creating this tonal instability that keeps you slightly off balance in a way that isn't purposeful or interesting. It's just inconsistent. And the dialogue pays the price for this confusion. Most of the time, it's perfectly serviceable, functional rom-com banter, some of it landing better than expected, none of it particularly memorable. But there are moments where a line lands with this cringe-inducing clunk, and you can usually trace it back to the film not knowing which register it's in. Is this a lighthearted comedy beat? A genuine emotional moment? The line is written as if it's both simultaneously, and it ends up being neither. The film also does this thing where a character will make an observation that's clearly supposed to be profound. One of those rom-com insights about love or life that's meant to crystallize the whole theme of the story, and the observation is delivered with such blunt directness that it actually undercuts itself. Good screenwriting earns those lines. It builds to them. It lets you feel the truth of them before someone says them out loud. When you skip the earning and just deliver the insight, it lands like a motivational poster instead of a character moment that lets talk about the people around Anna, because the film does some genuinely interesting things with its supporting cast, and some genuinely frustrating things. Francesca is the standout. It's not close. Every scene she's in is immediately more alive, and she accomplishes this without being the kind of scene stealer who makes the leads look diminished in comparison, which is a real skill. She's funny in a way that feels lived in rather than performed. Her comedic timing has this casual, unhurried quality, like she's barely trying, and that's exactly why it works. The film uses her well in the first two acts, and then slightly sidelines her when the emotional stakes get higher, which is a choice I understand from a structural standpoint, and still found mildly frustrating. She also gets the best line in the movie, which I won't spoil here, but if you've seen it, you know exactly which one I mean, and you're nodding right now. Matteo, on the other hand, is where the film lets me down most clearly. He has a function in the plot. He does not really have a character. He exists to create tension and then dissolve when the story no longer needs him. And the film never gives him enough specificity to feel like a real person rather than a narrative device. That's a shame, because a more fully developed version of him would make the love triangle actually interesting rather than perfunctory. If you genuinely couldn't tell which direction Anna should go, if both options had real weight and real cost, the middle act of this film would be considerably more involving. As it stands, the love triangle is less a triangle and more a triangle with one very short side. You know where it ends almost immediately, which takes most of the suspense out of it and makes certain scenes in the middle stretch feel like the film killing time. Given all of that, the predictable structure, the tonal inconsistency, the underdeveloped secondary characters, the dialogue that sometimes trips over itself. Why does this movie work? Why did I not forget it? Part of it is simply the performances. I've talked about the leads, but it extends to the whole cast. There's a generosity in how these actors show up to material that doesn't always deserve it. They play it real when real is what's needed, and they play it light when lightness is what's needed, and they find moments of genuine warmth throughout that elevate scenes which, on the page, were probably fairly ordinary. Part of it is Tuscany itself, and I say this knowing it sounds like I'm letting the movie off the hook by crediting the location. But filmmaking is filmmaking, and the visual language of this film is doing serious work. There's something about watching sunlight hit old stone walls and vineyards and narrow cobblestone streets that softens you, opens you up, makes you more receptive to the emotional beats the story is trying to land. It's not a cheat, it's craft. Using location as atmosphere is a legitimate storytelling tool, and this film uses it well. But mostly, I think the film works because it understands, intuitively, maybe not consciously, the specific emotional register it's after. Not excitement, not surprise, warmth. The feeling of watching something that likes you, that wants you to have a good time, that is genuinely on your side as a viewer. That's rarer than you'd think, and when you get it, you forgive a lot. This brings me to something I think about a lot in the context of the genre, and this film is a good occasion to say it out loud. Modern rom-coms are frequently criticized for their predictability, for relying on formula, for not innovating. And this criticism is factually accurate and almost entirely beside the point. Because I don't think most people watching you, me, and Tuscany want to be surprised by the ending. I think they want to see the journey. They want to spend time with characters they find appealing, in a world that looks beautiful, watching a love story unfold in the way that love stories, in movies at least, have always unfolded. There's a reason fairy tales have the same structure across cultures and centuries. There's a reason certain story shapes feel inevitable rather than predictable. They resonate not despite their familiarity, but because of it. The rom-com is, at its best, a comfort genre, not in a dismissive sense. Comfort is not a lesser artistic goal. Comfort is something we actively need, and delivering it well, with charm, with feeling, with characters you want to spend time with, is genuinely hard to do. The fact that you, me and Tuscany, does it mostly well in a landscape littered with films that attempted the same thing and fell flat is worth acknowledging. Is it a great film? No. Is it a film you'll quote to people or think about in a year? Probably not. Is it exactly what it sets out to be, delivered with enough warmth and enough genuine feeling to justify the 2 hours? Yes. Absolutely yes. And sometimes that is exactly enough. So that's where I land on you, me, and Tuscany. A film that knows its genre, mostly respects it, occasionally fumbles it, and ultimately charms its way over the finish line on the strength of its leads, its location, and the simple fact that it genuinely wants you to enjoy yourself. If you've seen it, I want your take. Did the tonal inconsistency bother you as much as it bothered me? But did you not even notice it because you were too busy enjoying the Francesca scenes? And which rom-com do you think actually figured out how to do this formula right? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. Like if this was useful. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of conversation. And I will see you in the next one.